I guess I can take this off here, huh? We're going to look at the first half of Nehemiah. Nehemiah. This summer, I taught a class on Jeremiah, and now I'm doing his brother Nehemiah. They were the Maya brothers. No, actually, they weren't even related. I'm just kidding. In the Bible, there's the Maya brothers and there's the Raya brothers. They use that. You see those names a lot. I'm waiting for my man to give me the signal. I feel like NASA getting ready to blast off or something. I actually prefer to be down here. We'll turn this mic on in a little bit. I prefer to be down here, but they told me the lights reflected off my head so much that it destroyed the broadcast. So I had to get back up here. He told me 1 minute. I'm watching Cliff. He's told me 1 minute. Ready to start? All right, is this on? Everybody hear me? Okay, good morning. Good morning. It's great to be with you. It's been kind of an uneventful week, and then we'll start this next week maybe a little bit more eventful. It's my pleasure to be here, substituting for Greg and Frank. And I thought it was quite an honor to substitute for those guys. But when I happen to look, I'm just the next one alphabetically. Harold, Hines, Hodge. I'm just the next one. So I thought, wow, those guys trusted me to teach their class. Actually, they just looked at the directory and picked the next person. So anyway, that's me. And what we've been doing, we've been studying the historical books. We started this back last summer. Roger and I started with the divided kingdom. And we looked at the death of Solomon and how the kingdom got divided. And we looked at how the northern kingdom of Israel fell. And we looked at how ultimately the southern kingdom of Judah fell. And the Israelites were carried into captivity. And then starting this quarter, Frank and Greg picked up with the captivity with Daniel and marched on through that, and we got to this point now. So this week we're going to look at Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah. Now it's interesting that in the Bible, the way the books were laid out, you have Ezra, you have Nehemiah, and you have Esther. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but actually Esther occurs earlier. Nehemiah is actually the last of the historical books. And I'll talk about that a little bit earlier. Let me show you this slide. I know that's small, and I apologize for that. I did not do this. I found somebody that did this, and I thought this is a very good slide, so I'm going to use this. And I know it's small, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to set the stage again. It's going to somewhat a review to set the stage to how we got here. Where are we? How we got here as we enter the book of Nehemiah. Now, if you can see this timeline here, and here we are with Josiah 640, and then here we are with the fall of Nineveh. Now, the Assyrians, it was the Assyrians that captured the northern kingdom of Israel, the capital city of Samaria, and the whole area took the name of Samaria after the Assyrians brought other people in. So the Assyrians captured Jerusalem. Then we see that in the fall of 612, Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, Nineveh fell to the Persians by Nabopolassar was the king, Nabopolassar, and then he set his sights on the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom fell around 736 BC. He set his sights on the southern kingdom, and he came to Jerusalem, southern kingdom. So we see the first deportation, 605 BC, the first deportation. I think he took off 10,000 people at that time, 10,000 of the best, the youngest, the brightest. I would not have been in that group had I been in Israel back in those days. Some of you perhaps would have. Daniel was included in that group. That was 605. Now, at that time, we see Nebuchadnezzar here takes over. His father died. Nabopolassar died, and Nebuchadnezzar had to go back to Persia to assume the throne from his father. And then as soon as he did, he turned around and headed back to Israel and to Judah. And he was the king here when he came in. And then there was a second deportation in 597, a second deportation of the Israelites to Babylon, to Persia in 597. And then finally, he comes back, Nebuchadnezzar comes back and makes a third attempt on Jerusalem, and he conquers Jerusalem completely. And in 586 BC, we see here the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC. And at that time, he destroys the temple, and he carries off more Israelites to Persia, to the Babylon area. Now, he didn't carry them all. There was still a remnant that remained in Judah following the third deportation. There was still a remnant of Israelites that remained, but he carried a great part of them off. Now, there is a line. Let's see if I can find this. In 605 BC, the prophet Jeremiah predicted that the nation of Judah would fall to the new Babylonian Empire. And he predicted that the city of Jerusalem and the temple would be destroyed. And he warned that the Jews would be forced marched into exile. And he also said that they would be there 70 years before they would return to Judah, repopulate Jerusalem. So in 605, we see then that first deportation, Jeremiah told them, here's what's going to happen. They're going to come in, they're going to take us, they're going to take Jerusalem, they're going to take us into captivity 70 years before God will let you come back. Now, we get into the book of Ezra. And Ezra starts recording the people coming back. There's the book of Ezra can actually be broken into two books because it covers two time periods. The first 6 chapters covers the first return of the Jews from captivity under the direction and leadership of Zerubbabel. About 50,000 Jews came back under Zerubbabel. So around 605, 70 years later, puts us around 535. So Cyrus became king, and he allows the Jews to start coming back under Zerubbabel, and we see that the temple, the rebuild of the temple, begins then around 536, a couple of years later. So it's been almost 70 years, just as Jeremiah said. It's been like 70 years, and they've started to come back now, and they're starting to rebuild the temple again under him. Now, the period in the first 6 chapters of Ezra covers about 23 years or so, period from 538 BC to about 515 BC, and we see them that they are building under Zerubbabel again. They're building the temple, and they're starting to kind of bring the tribes together and rebuild Jerusalem. Now, during the period between Ezra 6 and Ezra 7, there's a gap. And in that gap is when the events in the book of Esther take place. Esther becomes queen. Now, I think it was last week that Greg told us about the book of Esther. It's a very interesting book. It's a really historical book. The book of Esther was the last book added to the Old Testament canon. It's interesting that in the book of Esther never mentions the word God. Never mentions the word God. So there was some controversy, some argument about whether this book really should be in the Old Testament canon, but enough of the scholars felt like it should and was added. But it does just tell the story of the faith of God's people, and it gets into the Feast of Purim, and which Greg talked about last week. So Esther around 580, she became queen about 580. Excuse me, 480. Now you notice about 458, just a few years later, here we got Ezra again. So the second half of the book of Ezra picks up about that point, around 458, about 60 years later, then the second half of the book picks up. Now we see Ezra taking the lead, and Ezra brings a second group back to Israel. At this time, he brings about 2,000 exiles with him back there, and starts a spiritual revival. And the events in the second half of Ezra are all around Jerusalem and all around that area. So you see down there, that's where we've gotten with the fall, the 70 years, with the first group coming back under Zerubbabel. Then we see Esther, and then we see the second group coming back under Ezra. So the temple gets to start rebuilding at this point. And now we're going to get to around 446, 444, just a few years later, we're going to pick up with the book of Nehemiah. Now, let me show you something. This is Solomon's temple, an artist's rendering of Solomon's temple. And just notice the opulence. You know, the gold, the size. I mean, this is just amazing. And the Babylonians destroyed it. They just destroyed it. They took the stuff back with them. They say some of the Egyptians even came in and took some of the stuff to Egypt with them. But Solomon's temple was gone. 586 BC, it's gone. So Zerubbabel comes back. The first time he comes back in the first half of the book of Ezra. He builds his temple. This is Zerubbabel's temple. Solomon's temple, Zerubbabel's temple. Nothing like the temple they had before, right? It looks like something Rick McBrayer would build. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Rick. Rick probably would build this. Rick would build this, and I might build this if Jan Cronin helped me. But this is the second temple. Now, just to let you know where we are, and this is the temple that that the Jews at this point worshiped for years. And then finally, maybe 400 years later, King Herod becomes king, and he builds this temple. So, and this is actually a model of the temple that's on the grounds in the city of Jerusalem. But this is the third temple. Now, a lot of Jews, a lot of history you'll read will call this the second temple because they'll ignore Zerubbabel's temple. But this is King Herod's temple. This is the third temple. I just wanted to show you that. Now, so this kind of sets the stage for what we're going to talk about today. The book of Nehemiah opens up in the city of Susa, a Persian city of Susa. It's around 444 BC. Nehemiah is a Jew born in Persia during the exile. Nehemiah knows nothing about, he's never seen Jerusalem. He's never seen Solomon's temple. He doesn't even know a whole lot about the area. But he is a faithful follower of God. Now, obviously, his parents taught him well. And the people around him that were exiled taught him well. And he is truly, truly a man of God. Now, when we pick it up here, we see that Nehemiah is a cupbearer. A cupbearer. Now, what the cupbearer does, it's an extremely, extremely important and high-ranking official. And what he does is protect the king's food and wine from any attempt to poison the king. And often, he actually sips it before he gives it to the king. Now, just stop and think about it. If you're going to overthrow a king, one of the best ways to overthrow a king would be to poison him. So, you could get to that cupbearer and you could either threaten him or you could bribe him, blackmail him perhaps if he had low character. You could get to his family. Well, what if you got to his children and said, man, if you don't poison the king, I'm going to kill your children. Now, Nehemiah had no children. But it just shows you the importance of that position. That man had to be absolutely trustworthy and unfailing and unbending in his loyalty to the king. And because of that, the king regarded the cupbearer in very, very high esteem. A man of great honor, a man of great trust. Now, when we get to the book of Nehemiah, and I'm going to just look at the first 2 or 3 chapters today, and Greg is, I think Greg is going to finish it up next week. When I go back and read the book of Nehemiah, when I look at the person of Nehemiah, the character of Nehemiah, the thing that comes to my mind when I think about Nehemiah was A, his faith in God, and B, his humility toward God, and 3, his leadership. His leadership. I'm a big believer in leadership, the importance of leadership. And I've done a lot over my work career. I did a lot of classes on leadership, read a lot of books on leadership, because I just believe leadership is that important. Now, my good friend Jim Neely and I, we've developed a Sunday school course on leadership that we taught it to the young people. And then I think a couple of years ago, we actually taught an adult class on leadership. Leadership is extremely important. Now, everybody can't be a CEO. Not everybody wants to be a CEO. Everybody can't necessarily be a manager. That's not what I'm talking about. Being a manager and being a leader, being a CEO, being a leader are two different things. I think there's two different skills here. And you got managerial skills, you got leadership skills. And we need to develop leadership skills. Everyone can be a leader. This is a bold statement about me. Everyone can be a leader because it involves certain skills that we all can develop. Now, we all can't be president. We all can't be CEOs. We all can't be generals of the army. But all of us can be a leader because there are certain conditions, certain skills that every leader should have, and many of us have them innately, and some of us just need to develop those skills to make us a better leader. Every husband can be a leader. Every wife can be a leader. Everyone in this auditorium can be a leader. One of the main functions of a leader is to influence people toward doing what's right. And that's our role. And we all can do it. We can be a leader in our house. We can be a leader in our neighborhood. We want to influence people toward doing what's right. Now, we used a book by John Maxwell, who is a world-renowned expert on leadership. Hundreds of books on leadership. And he's got one little thin book on 21 indispensable qualities of a leader. Now, let me just tell you what some of these qualities, he says, of a leader. And ask yourself, do I have this quality? Do I possess this quality? Do I need to work on this quality? But when I look at this list, you're going to stop, you're going to smile, and you're going to say, yeah, you know what? I'm a leader. I can be a leader. Integrity, let's start there. Integrity, character, charisma, commitment, communication, competence, courage, discernment, focus, generosity, initiative, listening, passion, positive attitude, problem solving, relationship building, responsibility, security, self-discipline, servanthood, teachability, vision. See, those are some of the things that Maxwell said that we need to possess if we want to be a leader. And as I said, most of you, if not all of you, possess several of these qualities, if not all of these qualities. You can be a leader. You are a leader. Maybe if you don't think you're a leader, maybe we need to go back to the one that says courage. Take courage that you're a leader and become that leader. Nehemiah was that kind of leader. And Nehemiah goes to the king, and the king recognizes immediately something is wrong. What is wrong, Nehemiah? And he says, well, I've just got this bad report. Let's look at this in the first part of Nehemiah, in chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. Some people came back from Jerusalem. Certain men came back from Jerusalem, and I said, hey, how are the people in Jerusalem? How are they doing? You know, maybe this is a greeting. Everybody ever walk up to you and say, hey, how you doing? And then you start saying, gosh, my hands hurt, my knees hurt, you know, I just feel bad. Oh, that's not what they meant. They were just kind of greeting you. They were greeting you, and it's like, hey, how you doing? Just pass on by. Now, if somebody is really concerned, they say, how you doing? You okay? How you doing? So Nehemiah sees these people, and he says, how are all my friends back in Israel doing? How are they doing? Was that a greeting, or was he really concerned? How are they doing? And the answer came back to him, the remnant there in the province who have survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and the gates are destroyed by fire. And Nehemiah said, as soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. And I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. He was concerned. Sometimes things bother us. A lot of things bother us. A lot of things bother me. Sometimes there's things, they bother us and they're nitpicking and there's not a whole lot I can do about it, so I don't worry about it so much. That's the thing to do. Control what you can control and let go of what you have to. Some things bother us. Some things burden us. Some things weigh heavy on us. And when they weigh heavy on you, when they burden on you, that's when you have to do something. Try not to let little things bother you. But when something burdens you, you must do something about it. It's time to take action. This is a burden. This is a real problem. I just can't ignore it. I've got to do something about it. Nehemiah is burdened. He wept and mourned for days. And the first thing he did was what? Prayed to God. He prayed. I talked about his humility. He knows he can't solve this problem alone. He knows he's got to have God's help. He prays to God. He goes to the king, and the king says, go to Jerusalem. Go fix it. So he lets him go to Jerusalem. Now, remember, the temple has been rebuilt. The little bric-a-brac temple has been rebuilt. But what has not been rebuilt are the gates around the city. They need the gates around the city for protection. And it's also, and I say this, it's also some sort of a symbol to them. The gates are torn down. What does that say? What does that say about your city? Let your gates get torn down. What does that say about your pride in yourself? What does that say about your God? That's how Nehemiah say it. This is an insult to God that we have allowed the gates of the city to be torn down. So Nehemiah says, we're going to fix these gates. Now, you can't see this very well, but this is the wall around Jerusalem. There are 12 gates. There are 12 gates around Jerusalem. At night, Nehemiah goes out and inspects these gates. And he knows that there's a lot of gates that's got to be fixed. And so he gets the people together. And he does this. He says, guys, we have a problem. And here's the plan to fix it. See, that's what a leader does too. A leader says, I'm going to tell you the problem. I'm not going to hide it from you. I'm going to tell you the problem, and I'm going to tell you the plan to fix it. And he might say, and you give me your input. A good leader will say, you give me your input into this plan. But a leader says, here is the problem, here is the plan, and we're going to fix this. And you read 2nd and 3rd Nehemiah. Go back and read this and see how he got all the people and how he got them all together, and they started rebuilding the walls of the city. And see how they were threatened by their opposition. And at some point, some of the people, some of the workers had to work with one hand and keep a weapon in the other hand. But they didn't stop working. They never stopped working. And they built the walls of that city back. This is just a picture. It's not very good, but this kind of shows you Jerusalem. So up here is the temple, where Zerubbabel's temple is. Here's the city. Here's kind of the old city here, and there are the walls around Jerusalem. And he had to build these walls back. Here's another picture. I don't know if you can see from that. This is another artist rendering of the city of Jerusalem during the time of Nehemiah. The temple up here on the hill, the city here, and the walls. It's a lot of walls, people. And a lot of them were down. They had to build those walls back. And Nehemiah did it. And as the leader, Nehemiah had to protect his people from the opposition. He had to see that they had the protection they needed to finish this wall. He had to protect them. He had to encourage them. That's one of the qualities of a leader. A leader has to be an encourager. A leader has to get in there and work with the people and daily just encourage them and give them what they need to do the job. And that's what Nehemiah was doing. He was just an encourager. And he had to remind them that God was on their side. He kept telling them that God was on their side. God was with them. If anybody's going to be against them, how can anybody be against them if God is with them? So he led courageously. He led them strategically. And the people were successful in building back the walls. And they got some of their pride back. And it was kind of an honor to God that we have built the walls back to his city. Now, you know, later the Romans come in, everything kind of gets down. But this is a great story from Nehemiah. Here's a picture of the wall, some of the walls. It's not very good, but here's some of the walls of Jerusalem here today. We had the pleasure of going to Jerusalem a couple years ago. Here's some of the walls. Maybe this is a better picture. Here's some of the walls of Jerusalem today. See that? The walls that still go around the city. Still go around the city today. I was going to show you this. This is the Western Wall. It used to be called the Wailing Wall. It's the original Western Wall back from the time of Nehemiah, and the Jews gather there and pray at the Wailing Wall. And you can write something on a little piece of paper, somebody's name on a little piece of paper, and you can roll it up in a ball and you can stick it in a crack. I wrote my grandchildren's name. Put it in one of the cracks. Excuse me. But under the leadership of Nehemiah, Jerusalem was restored somewhat. And the people got their pride back. They got their city back. And they gave all the credit to God, who made it possible for them to do it. The power of God and the leadership of a good man, a lot of things can happen. You know, years later, the leadership of a good man came, a man who had all these qualities. He was burdened by the sin that we all had, the sin that we all felt, and he took the burden of sin from us, put it on his back, carried it to a cross, and took our sins away from us. That was a good leader. That was the best leader. He took our sins away for us. All right, next week, we'll look at the second half of the book, and we'll kind of start closing up the historical part of the books of the Bible. I invite you to go back and read the book of Nehemiah. There's some really good prayers in that book. And I want to thank you very much for your attendance.